had with some beer and teeny-weeny glasses.
How many teeny-weeny glasses did you have?
72.
Behind the wholesome family sitcom that defined 1970s television lay some of the strangest production secrets, casting mishaps, and behind-the-scenes chaos in TV history. From disappearing family members to terrified motorcyclists, censored leather jackets to accidental injuries that made it to air, the making of this Milwaukee-set masterpiece was far weirder than audiences ever imagined. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about Happy Days. Fact 1. Fonzie's jacket was banned by censors.
Looking around this room here, there's nobody that could have thought of it but you. Huh? You're so smart. You slipped something right through his ginger ale. Yeah.
When Happy Days premiered in 1974, one of television's most iconic pieces of clothing almost never made it to screen, because network executives were terrified it would turn Arthur Fonzarelli into a dangerous criminal in the eyes of viewers. A BC censors initially refused to allow Henry Winkler to wear a leather jacket while playing the Fonz, insisting that the tough guy look had too many associations with gangs, hoodlums, and juvenile delinquents who were causing problems across America during that era. Instead of the cool brown leather jacket that would later become synonymous with the character, Winkler was forced to wear what he later described as a terrible-looking windbreaker in various shades of blue and stone during the show's early episodes. The network believed this safer, more wholesome appearance would better fit the family-friendly tone they wanted for their nostalgic look back at 1950s Milwaukee, where the Cunningham family represented traditional American values that parents could trust their children to watch. Producer Gary Marshall, however, wasn't ready to give up on his vision of Fonzie as the ultimate cool guy, so he cleverly negotiated a compromise with the nervous ABC executives. Marshall convinced the network that Fonzie could wear his leather jacket, but only when he appeared in scenes with his motorcycle, arguing that the jacket was actually a necessary safety measure for motorcycle riding rather than a fashion statement meant to glorify criminal behavior. This arrangement led to one of the show's most memorable running gags, as writers were instructed to never create a scene without Fonzie's motorcycle present, which meant the bike had to appear everywhere Fonzie went, whether he was inside Arnold's drive-in, standing in the Cunningham living room, or even hanging out in his upstairs apartment above their garage. Fact 2. Chuck Cunningham syndrome was born here.
Hi, Mom. Joni and I thought we'd come home for lunch so we could spend a little more time with you.
How nice. Dad, what are you doing here?
I live here.
Happy Days created one of television's most famous disappearing acts when Charles Chuck Cunningham, the oldest son of the family, simply walked upstairs one day during season 2 and never came back down again, launching a phenomenon that would plague countless TV shows for decades to come. Chuck was originally introduced as Richie and Joni's basketball-playing older brother who shared a bedroom with Richie and was known for constantly bouncing a ball around the house while making only occasional appearances in family scenes. The character was played by 3 different actors during his brief existence on the show, starting with Rick Carrot in the original 1972 pilot episode, followed by Gavin O'Herlihy for most of Season 1, and finally Randolph Roberts for just 2 episodes in Season 2 before Chuck vanished completely from the Cunningham household. O'Herlihy, who portrayed Chuck for the longest period, later revealed that he actually requested to leave the show because he felt his character had no real purpose beyond bouncing a basketball and occasionally grunting a few lines of dialogue every couple of weeks. What made Chuck's disappearance so bizarre was that the show didn't just write him out by sending him away to college or having him move to another city, like most television programs would handle an unwanted character. Instead, Chuck was completely erased from the family's history as if he had never existed at all, with later episodes treating Richie and Joni as the only Cunningham children and their parents referring to having raised just 2 kids instead of 3. This strange phenomenon became so well known among television fans and industry professionals that Chuck's name was permanently attached to the concept, creating the term Chuck Cunningham syndrome to describe any TV character who disappears from a show without explanation and is never mentioned again, as if they were completely wiped from the show's memory. Fact 3. Henry Winkler never actually rode the motorcycle.
Then you'll be checked for pulse and heartbeat. Fonzarelli.
The coolest character on television during the 1970s was completely terrified of the very thing that made him so iconic, as Henry Winkler's fear of motorcycles led to one of the most dangerous accidents in Happy Days history and forced the production team to create elaborate workarounds for nearly every scene involving Fonzie's famous ride. Despite playing Arthur Fonzarelli, the leather-jacketed greaser who could start his motorcycle with a snap of his fingers and rode around Milwaukee like he owned the streets, Winkler had never been on a motorcycle before landing the role and was absolutely petrified of the powerful machines from the very beginning. During one of the show's early filming sessions, Winkler was asked to perform what seemed like a simple task: rev the engine of Fonzie's 1949 Triumph Trophy motorcycle and drive it forward about 5 feet for a basic scene. However, Winkler's dyslexia made it difficult for him to quickly read and understand the various dials and controls on the motorcycle, and when he attempted to follow the director's instructions, he accidentally gunned the engine at full throttle instead of gently moving forward. The powerful motorcycle shot across the soundstage like a rocket, sending Winkler flying directly toward the director of photography, who had to leap out of the way to avoid being seriously injured or killed by the out-of-control bike and its panicked rider. Winkler and the motorcycle slid under a nearby sound truck, creating chaos on the set as crew members rushed to check if the bike was damaged, with Winkler's safety apparently being a secondary concern to the expensive rented equipment. After this terrifying incident, the production team decided that Winkler would never actually ride the motorcycle again, instead using a clever system where the bike was attached to a hidden wheeled platform and pulled by trucks for any scenes requiring movement. Fact 4. Robin Williams sat on his head.
I think I want to wake up now.
Strange custom.
During auditions, Robin Williams landed his breakthrough role as Mork from the Planet Ork through one of the most unconventional auditions in television history, literally turning the casting process upside down when he decided to interpret a simple instruction in the most creative way possible. The Happy Days producers were desperately searching for someone to play an alien character in what they knew was a terrible script for the episode My Favorite Orkin, and they were running out of time since filming was supposed to begin on Friday, and it was already Wednesday, with no suitable actor in sight. When Williams walked into the audition room, he appeared to be a quiet, shy young man who seemed nothing like the manic energy that would soon make him famous, but everything changed the moment casting director asked him to take a seat so they could begin the reading. Instead of simply sitting down in the chair like any normal person would do, Williams decided to literally sit on his head in the chair, balancing upside down while looking at the producers with a completely straight face, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. Producer Gary Marshall was so impressed and amused by this instantly bizarre display of physical comedy that he hired Williams on the spot, later joking that Williams was the only alien who auditioned, since his unconventional behavior actually made him seem like he could genuinely be from another planet. Williams had been taking acting classes alongside Al Molinaro, who played Al Del Vecchio on Happy Days, and when Molinaro suggested him for the role, the producers were initially hesitant because Williams had very little television experience. However, once Williams opened his mouth and began improvising dialogue during the audition, Henry Winkler later described the experience as watching a volcano go off on stage 19 at Paramount, and everyone immediately knew they were witnessing something special that would change television comedy forever. Fact 5. The show almost called Cool.
Listen, you don't get the idea. Now, I'll just whip over there and I'll just scare the daylights out of them. You know, hit the road, hamburger, like that.
One of television's most beloved family sitcoms nearly had a completely different identity that would have captured the rebellious spirit of 1950s rock and roll culture, rather than the wholesome nostalgia that eventually made it famous. As creator Gary Marshall originally wanted to call his new series Cool before network executives and focus groups steered him toward the more family-friendly title that became synonymous with American television history. Marshall believed that the single word cool perfectly embodied the essence of what he was trying to create, since it represented everything that teenagers and young adults in the 1950s found exciting and desirable about their rapidly changing world. The original concept behind the title reflected Marshall's vision of focusing more heavily on the greaser culture, motorcycle riding, and rock and roll music that defined youth rebellion during that era, with characters like Fonzie representing the dangerous yet appealing bad boy image that attracted both teenage viewers and their worried parents. Marshall felt that Cool would immediately communicate to audiences that this wasn't going to be another squeaky clean family show, but rather something that acknowledged the edgier aspects of growing up during a time when traditional values were being challenged by new forms of music, fashion, and social attitudes. However, network executives at ABC were concerned that a title like Cool might alienate older viewers and parents who were looking for programming they could watch with their children without worrying about inappropriate content or messages that might encourage rebellious behavior. The show's focus gradually shifted toward emphasizing the warmth and stability of the Cunningham family rather than the excitement of teenage rebellion, leading to the decision to choose Happy Days as a title that better reflected the nostalgic, feel-good atmosphere that would eventually make the series a cultural phenomenon that appealed to multiple generations of viewers. Fact 6. Ron Howard joined to avoid Vietnam draft.
The other day I was telling you about me and Mary Lou Milligan. Well, the fact is, I played chess.
You played with her chest?
Ron Howard's decision to accept the starring role of Richie Cunningham on Happy Days was motivated by much more than just advancing his acting career, as the young performer was facing the very real possibility of being drafted into military service during the Vietnam War, and desperately needed a way to stay in the United States to pursue his dream of becoming a film director. Howard had already experienced success as a child actor playing Opie Taylor on The Andy Griffith Show. But by the time Happy Days was being developed in the early 1970s, he was much more interested in getting behind the camera than continuing to act in front of it. The future Academy Award-winning director had been accepted into the film program at the University of Southern California and was eager to begin his studies in 1974. But the ongoing Vietnam conflict meant that young men his age were still being called up for military service through the draft lottery system. Howard later revealed in interviews that he had received what he described as a lousy number in the draft lottery, which meant there was a strong chance he would be selected for military service and sent overseas before he could complete his education or establish himself in the film industry. However, Howard had read somewhere that men whose jobs could be directly related to employing 30 or more people could qualify for a military deferment, and starring in a television series certainly fit those requirements, since TV shows require large crews of writers, directors, camera operators, sound technicians, set designers, and many other professionals to keep production running smoothly. When the opportunity to star in Happy Days presented itself, Howard realized that accepting the role would not only allow him to continue working in entertainment, but also provide him with the legal protection he needed to avoid being drafted while the war was still ongoing. Fact 7. Fonzie's hair comb never touched his hair.
They think there's only two different kinds of people, white and colored.
There are two kinds of people,
cool and nerds, and the people down in Arnold's are nerds.
One of television's most memorable character quirks was born from Henry Winkler's quick thinking and creative rebellion against what he saw as an overused cliché that would have made Fonzie look like just another ordinary tough guy, instead of the unique cool character that audiences came to love. During the early development of Fonzie's personality, writers and directors naturally assumed that the leather-jacketed greaser would constantly be combing his slicked-back hair like every other hoodlum character that had appeared in movies and television shows since the 1950s, since this behavior had become the standard way to show that someone was part of the rebellious youth culture. However, Winkler strongly disagreed with this approach and argued against having Fonzie repeatedly comb his hair during scenes, explaining to the creative team that this tired routine would make his character blend in with every other generic tough guy that audiences had already seen countless times before. Instead of simply refusing to do the hair-combing scenes, Winkler came up with a brilliant alternative that would showcase Fonzie's supreme confidence and self-assurance while also getting some laughs from the studio audience who were watching the show being filmed. During one particular scene that called for Fonzie to comb his hair in front of a mirror, Winkler spontaneously created the now famous routine where Fonzie reaches for his comb, looks at himself in the mirror, and then shrugs with his signature "ay" sound, as if to say that his hair already looks absolutely perfect and doesn't need any improvement whatsoever. The studio audience immediately burst into laughter at this unexpected twist on their expectations, and the writers loved the gag so much that it became a permanent part of Fonzie's character throughout the entire run of the series, with Fonzie later bragging that he had owned the same comb for 9 years, but it had never once touched his hair. Fact 8. The original pilot had a different father.
We had with some beer and teeny-weeny glasses.
How many teeny-weeny glasses did you have?
72.
The warm, friendly father figure that millions of viewers came to know and love, as Howard Cunningham was actually played by a completely different actor in the original concept for Happy Days, as veteran character actor Harold Gould portrayed the family patriarch in the 1972 pilot episode that aired as part of the anthology series Love, American Style. Gould, who was already well established in Hollywood with memorable roles in films and television shows, brought his own interpretation to the role of the hardware store owner who tried to guide his children through the challenges of growing up in 1950s Milwaukee. When ABC decided to turn the pilot into a full television series 2 years later, Gould was initially expected to reprise his role as the Cunningham father and continue building the character he had already established in the original episode. However, during the delay between the pilot and the start of regular production, Gould had committed himself to performing in a stage play abroad, and when the network finally gave Happy Days the green light to begin filming, he faced a difficult choice between honoring his theatrical commitment or returning to television. Gould ultimately decided that he needed to keep his promise to the theater production, which meant that the producers had to quickly find a replacement actor who could bring the same warmth and authority to the role of Howard Cunningham. Tom Bosley, who had already made a name for himself on Broadway and in various television appearances, was brought in to take over the part, and his gentle, understanding portrayal of the family patriarch became one of the defining elements of Happy Days throughout its 11-season run. The transition was so seamless that many viewers never realized that 2 different actors had played Howard Cunningham, with Bosley's performance becoming the definitive version of the character that audiences remember decades later. Fact 9. The house layout changed completely.
Steve the Maloney was so happy that they came back.
You know, they're kind of cute.
Yeah, aren't they? Look how they're all snuggling up together.
The Cunningham family home underwent such a dramatic architectural transformation between seasons 2 and 3 that viewers who paid close attention to the set design would have noticed that the family appeared to have moved into a completely different house overnight, even though the show never acknowledged any change in their living situation. During the first 2 seasons of Happy Days, the interior of the Cunningham home featured a specific layout where visitors entered through the front door and immediately saw the staircase leading to the second floor on their left side, with a cozy fireplace positioned right next to those stairs to create a warm, welcoming atmosphere for family gatherings. However, when the show returned for its 3rd season, production designers had completely redesigned the entire set to better accommodate the new filming style that used multiple cameras and a live studio audience instead of the single camera setup that had been used previously. The most noticeable change was that the staircase had been moved from the left side of the living room to the right side, completely flipping the basic flow and feel of the family's main gathering space, while the fireplace that had been such a prominent feature during the first 2 seasons was removed entirely and never seen again. The kitchen also received major modifications during this redesign, most notably the addition of a pass-through window that connected the kitchen to the living room and allowed characters to easily communicate between the 2 spaces during scenes. This pass-through had never existed during the first 2 seasons, when the kitchen had been completely separated from the living room, but it became a frequently used element in later episodes, where family members would lean through the opening to join conversations or pass food and drinks back and forth during family gatherings and holiday celebrations. Fact 10. Pat Morita created a fake accent backstory.
Japanese, Chinese, Korean, a little Hungarian.
Well, tell me something. What do you consider yourself?
Good looking.
Pat Morita, the Japanese-American actor who played Arnold Takahashi, the owner of Arnold's Drive-In restaurant on Happy Days, found himself caught in an impossible situation that forced him to create an elaborate fictional backstory for his character just to keep his job when network censors decided his performance was somehow politically incorrect. Morita, who was born in California and spoke perfect, unaccented English like any other American actor, was initially told by director Jerry Paris that he needed to pick an accent for his character because ABC executives believed that an obviously Asian character should speak with a distinctive foreign accent rather than sounding like a regular American. Following the network's misguided instructions, Morita adopted an exaggerated Chinese pidgin English dialect for his portrayal of Arnold, complete with broken grammar and mispronunciations that fit the stereotypical expectations of what television executives in the 1970s thought Asian characters should sound like. However, about 6 weeks after Morita began playing the role with this artificial accent, the same network standards and practices department that had originally demanded he use a foreign accent suddenly decided that his performance was now problematic for completely different reasons. A standards and practices representative approached Morita along with director Paris to inform him that he could no longer play Arnold because the character was obviously Chinese-American based on his accent, but Morita himself was Japanese-American, which the network now considered inappropriate ethnic miscasting. Faced with losing his role entirely due to this bureaucratic confusion, Morita quickly invented a creative solution by explaining that his character Arnold's full name was Arnold Takahashi, and that he was actually the product of a mixed marriage between a Japanese father and a Chinese mother, which would explain both his Japanese surname and his Chinese-influenced speaking style. The network executives accepted this hastily created backstory, allowing Morita to continue playing the character throughout the show's run. Fact 11. The Mork episode was unreadable.
Well, because my father is a conservative, puritanical...
Nerd.
The Happy Days episode that would launch Robin Williams to superstardom and create one of television's most successful spin-offs was originally considered such a disaster by the cast and crew that they couldn't believe anyone would actually want to film it, with actor Anson Williams, who played Potsy, later describing My Favorite Orkin as the worst script in the history of Happy Days, that was so poorly written it was practically unreadable. The episode came about after creator Gary Marshall took his son to see the movie Star Wars, and his child asked if Happy Days could do an episode featuring a visitor from outer space, which seemed like a reasonable request until the writers actually tried to create a story that would fit the show's wholesome family atmosphere. The original script was so bad that even Ron Howard, who rarely complained about the show's writing, admitted that it was an episode that didn't read so great, and that ABC network executives strongly opposed producing it because they felt it would be too ridiculous and fantastical for the realistic tone that Happy Days had established during its first few seasons. Producer Gary Marshall had to fight with the network just to get permission to film the episode, and even then, many people involved with the production were convinced they were making a terrible mistake that would embarrass everyone associated with the show. The first actor hired to play the alien Mork was apparently so awful that the cast members openly referred to him as horrible. And when that actor quit the production just days before filming was scheduled to begin, the producers were left scrambling to find a replacement for a role that nobody seemed to want because the script was so poorly conceived. However, once Robin Williams was cast and began improvising his own dialogue and physical comedy, during filming, he completely transformed the terrible script into comedy gold, with his manic energy and brilliant improvisational skills turning what should have been a career-ending disaster into television history. Fact 12. Laverne and Shirley became more popular than Happy Days.
Formal dress. We ain't got nothing to wear to this, and we can't afford to buy new clothes. Don't worry, we'll come up with something. I got a better idea. Let's not go.
In one of the most remarkable success stories in television history, Laverne and Shirley not only became a hit in its own right, but actually eclipsed the popularity of Happy Days, the very show that had created it, achieving something that almost never happens when a spin-off series competes directly with its parent program for audience attention and ratings dominance. The two characters, played by Penny Marshall and Cindy Williams, had originally appeared on Happy Days as a couple of working-class women who Fonzie called up to help Richie with his dating problems. But their natural chemistry and comedic timing were so impressive that producer Gary Marshall decided they deserved their own series. When Laverne and Shirley premiered in January of 1976 as a mid-season replacement show, it was initially supposed to serve as a supporting program that would help boost the ratings of Happy Days by keeping viewers tuned to ABC on Tuesday nights. However, the spin-off became an immediate sensation that resonated with audiences even more powerfully than the original series, with viewers connecting strongly to the stories of two single women working at a Milwaukee brewery while trying to achieve their dreams and navigate the challenges of independent living. By its third and fourth seasons, Laverne and Shirley had become the most-watched television program in America, according to Nielsen ratings, surpassing not only Happy Days, but every other show on television during those years, which was an almost unprecedented achievement for a spin-off series. The show maintained its position as ABC's top-rated program for 3 consecutive seasons, proving that the characters created by Gary Marshall had struck a chord with viewers that was even stronger than the nostalgic appeal of the Cunningham family and their adventures in 1950s Milwaukee, making Laverne and Shirley one of the most successful spin-offs in television history. Fact 13. The show coined. Jumping the shark.
I'm real sorry, you know? I mean, as much as I'd like to invite you in to have a little small talk and everything, I got so many things to do, you know? Like give Richie a message from Mary and clean the bugs off my headlights, stuff like that, you know what I mean? Hello.
Happy Days created one of the most enduring phrases in modern entertainment criticism when a single episode featuring Fonzie on water skis became the ultimate symbol of what happens when a successful television show desperately tries to recapture its popularity by doing something so outrageous and ridiculous that it signals the beginning of its creative decline. The episode, Hollywood Part 3, aired on September 20th, 1977, during the show's 5th season, and featured Arthur Fonzarelli demonstrating his coolness and courage by literally jumping over a live shark while water skiing during a family vacation to California. The bizarre scene came about because Henry Winkler had casually mentioned to his fellow cast members that he had worked as a water ski instructor before becoming an actor, and the show's writers decided they needed to find a way to incorporate this skill into an episode that would showcase Fonzie's fearless personality and physical abilities. However, many viewers felt that having the leather-jacketed tough guy perform dangerous aquatic stunts while wearing swim shorts was so far removed from the show's original concept that it represented a desperate attempt to generate excitement and publicity for a series that was running out of fresh ideas. In 1985, entertainment writer John Hine coined the phrase "jumping the shark" to describe this specific moment and extended it to mean any point when a television show, movie, or other creative work makes a dramatic change that signals its decline in quality and popularity. The expression became so widely used that it spawned books, websites, and board games dedicated to identifying when various forms of entertainment had reached their jump the shark moment, making Happy Days responsible for creating a piece of cultural vocabulary that continues to be used decades later to describe creative works that have passed their prime. Fact 14. Don Most auditioned for Richie's role.
Wait a minute, what's the big hurry? Let me make a few calls first in my office.
Rough, that's Fonzie's office.
Not anymore.
Don Most, who became famous for playing the joke-telling, self-deprecating Ralph Malph throughout Happy Days' 11-season run, originally walked into his audition with much bigger ambitions, hoping to land the starring role of Richie Cunningham that would eventually make Ron Howard one of the most recognizable young actors on television. Most had prepared extensively for what he hoped would be his breakthrough audition, studying the character of the all-American teenager who served as the heart and soul of the Cunningham family and represented the wholesome values that the show wanted to celebrate during its nostalgic look back at 1950s Milwaukee. However, when Most performed his audition for producer Gary Marshall and the casting directors, it became clear that while he had talent and charisma, he didn't quite fit the clean-cut, boy-next-door image that they were seeking for the character who would serve as the show's central protagonist and moral compass. Ron Howard, who had already established himself as a beloved child actor through his work on The Andy Griffith Show, possessed the exact combination of innocence, likability, and acting experience that the producers felt was essential for making audiences care about Richie's coming-of-age adventures and family relationships. Rather than simply rejecting Most and sending him away empty-handed, Marshall recognized that the young actor had a natural comedic timing and personality that could be valuable to the show in a different capacity. So he decided to create the character of Ralph Malph, specifically to take advantage of Most's strengths as a performer. The role of Ralph, Richie's wisecracking best friend, who was known for his terrible jokes and self-aware commentary about his own lack of success with girls, became one of the show's most memorable supporting characters and allowed Most to showcase his comedic abilities throughout the series' entire run. Fact 15. Palm trees appeared in 1950s. Milwaukee.
Oh, well, I'm trying to make this place run a little bit efficient, you know? So I got some ideas, but Frank thinks I'm trying to steal his job. I just wish you'd talk to him, Fonz.
No.
Ah, thanks. No?
Despite Happy Days being set in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, during the 1950s and 60s, observant viewers who paid careful attention to the background details during outdoor scenes could occasionally spot distinctly California palm trees swaying in the breeze behind the characters, completely destroying the illusion that the Cunningham family actually lived in the cold industrial Midwest, where such tropical vegetation would never survive the harsh winter climate. This geographical impossibility became one of the most obvious examples of how television productions in the 1970s often prioritized convenience and budget considerations over authentic location filming, since it was much cheaper and easier for Paramount Studios to shoot all exterior scenes on their California backlot, rather than sending cast and crew members to Milwaukee for authentic outdoor footage. The palm tree problem was particularly noticeable during scenes filmed around Arnold's Drive-In, where characters would gather outside the restaurant to talk, flirt, and show off their cars, while tropical foliage clearly visible in the background made it obvious to anyone familiar with Midwestern geography that these teenagers were definitely not hanging out in Wisconsin during an era when cross-country travel was much more difficult and expensive than it would become in later decades. The production team apparently hoped that most viewers would be so focused on the characters and dialogue that they wouldn't notice these botanical inconsistencies. But eagle-eyed fans of the show began pointing out the palm trees as evidence of Hollywood's sometimes careless approach to maintaining the authentic atmosphere that the show was supposedly trying to create. While some exterior scenes were actually filmed in the Midwest, with Ron Howard later revealing that many outdoor shots were captured in Munster, Indiana. The California palm trees served as a constant reminder that Happy Days was ultimately a Hollywood production that relied on studio magic, rather than genuine location authenticity, to transport audiences back to the supposedly simpler times of small-town American life.